hello, bye. We're going to continue on with chapter 15. Again, we're talking about the theory of evolution, and we mentioned Charles Darwin is kind of the person who gets the most credit with coming up with our theory of evolution. However, there were other people along the way that kind of helped him out along this course, and so the title of this section is Ideas that Shaped Darwin's Thinking. So these are some ideas that really helped Darwin come up with his theory of evolution as well. So he didn't come up with it all on his own. He stole bits and pieces of it, eliminated bits and pieces of it from other ideas of other scientists of that time. So our first part of this section is called An Ancient Changing Earth. So there's two guys by the last name of Hutton and Lyell, and so he used them to describe geologic change. So what did they do to contribute to Darwin? So Hutton and Lyell, they helped scientists recognize that the Earth is many millions of years old, and the process that changed Earth in the past are the same presents that operate in the present. So there was probably a time, this is a time when the church heavily dominated everything in terms of science, and so they might have just said that the Earth is only a couple thousand years old. However, these two, by the look at just kind of the geologic processes like volcanoes, things like that, erosion, tornadoes, things like that, that there are all the same things that have gone on in the past that are going on now, and that the Earth is millions of years old. So that was their big contributions. The Earth is millions of years old. And so getting in specific with a guy by the name of Hutton, so in 1795, James Hutton published a hypothesis about the geologic forces that shaped Earth, and most of these geologic forces operate very slowly over millions of years, and he proposed that the Earth had to be much more than a few thousand years old. So again, this is kind of just what I said. So things like erosion, like the Grand Canyon, didn't just appear one day. That's just a process of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, if not millions of years of water just kind of wearing away at the same area, carving it out into the rock and things like that. So that's a geologic force. It's just things like erosion, earthquakes, volcanoes, things like that that go on with the Earth that can cause them to change. And they operate, again, very slowly over millions of years that can cause the Earth to change. So that was Hutton's contribution. And again, the big thing that the Earth had to be much more older than a few thousand years old, because that was the accepted idea of the church at the time. And so then Lyell, what did he do to kind of help out Darwin? So he stressed that scientists must explain past events in terms of processes that they can actually observe. And so the process that shaped the Earth millions of years earlier continue in the present. So he was just saying that things that shaped the Earth long ago, they didn't change. It's not like the Earth was some crazy, the temperature was different back then, but overall, their same processes are going on today that went on back then that helped shape the Earth, so they're help shaping us right now as well. And his work explained how geologic features could be built up or torn down over long periods of time. Again, that's just like the making of mountains. Again, the Grand Canyon is a good example. Things like that. So that's just, they showed how the Earth worked, and that's kind of how, this is what Darwin took away to help develop his theory, is how old the Earth is and how the Earth is shaped today. And so again, how this influenced Darwin. So if the Earth could change over time, life might change as well. So if the face of the Earth, again, like the structures, the land masses, if they could change, then the animals probably were going to have to change with them, or plants and animals as well. And it would have taken many years for life to change in the way Lyell suggested. So this would have been possible only if the Earth were extremely old. So what that means is that animals didn't just change overnight. It's not just like one day I have red skin and then now I have blue skin the next day. So it would have to be a process that took a long time in order for life to change, and that's the way Lyell suggested. Again, so that's how they helped out Darwin, is that if the Earth could change, life could change as well, and that wouldn't just be a very instant change, it would have to take a long time. And so then that is how Lyell and Hutton helped out Darwin. And now the next thing is going to be kind of a guy that had an opposing view of Darwin by the last name of Lamarck. So how did he, again, Darwin wasn't the only person trying to figure out how species evolved. There was other people, and so how did this Lamarck guy see things? So John Baptiste Lamarck recognized that living things have changed over time, that all species were descended from other species, and that organisms were adapted to their environments. So these three things are pretty accurate into how we view them today. So he did have some correct ideas. So that living things could change over time, they evolved, they descended from other species, and they were adapted to their environments. However, where Lamarck kind of got off course was he proposed that by selective use or disuse of organs, organism would acquire or lose certain traits during the course of their lifetime, and these traits could then be passed on to their offspring. Over time, this process would lead to change in a species. So basically what that means is, if you're a crab and all of a sudden you have a little claw and your little claws don't do very well for you, then you can develop a big claw, and the big claw helps you fight off and win mates, and then therefore you're going to pass that big claw on. So that's what he thought, was that if you didn't use something, it would just go away. However, if you use something, it would constantly be passed on. And so this has led to a thing what he called tendency toward perfection. So he proposed that all organisms have an innate tendency towards complexity and perfection. So that means that all organisms have this kind of driving force to be perfect, and that they're continually changing and acquiring features that help them live more successfully in their environments. So he thought that, again, that a feature could almost just show up instantaneously, and this was through the process of use and disuse. So he proposed that organisms could alter the size or shape of particular organisms by using their bodies in new ways. And so again, I kind of mentioned this, but his example was that a male fiddler crab will use its front claw to ward off predators and to attract mates. So we can see here we have the male is the big blue one, and they kind of have a little claw there that's using to attract mates and to ward off predators. And however, because the front claw is used repeatedly, it becomes larger. So his view was that since the crab was using that claw so much, that the claw would just grow within just that one lifetime. So because this crab used this claw so much, the large claw grew, and he would then pass that on to his offspring. So then the offspring would have large claws. And so what he meant so kind of the theory behind that was then all of a sudden, so any animal could develop any trait at any time, and then after they developed that trait within the course of their lifetime, he called that an acquired characteristic, and then he thought that could be passed on. And he believed that if an animal acquired a particular feature in his lifetime, that feature would be passed on to its offspring. So he was kind of really off base with this, and then so we're going to look at kind of how he was off base. So Lamarck's hypothesis of evolution was incorrect in several ways. So he did not know how traits are inherited, and he did not know that an organism's behavior has no effect on its heritable characteristics. So even though he was kind of really wrong to begin with, he did pave the way for the work of later biologists. So again, he didn't have the technology that we have today, so you can't call him an idiot or anything, but he was off base on his ideas, because this is really not how evolution works at all, but he did pave the way for later biologists. And so then our last person that kind of worked with Darwin, that Darwin stole his ideas, was a guy by the last name of Malthus. So in 1798, Thomas Malthus published a book in which he noted that babies were being born faster than people were dying, and the only forces he observed that worked against this growth were war, famine, and disease. So he started writing about population growth in humans, and he reasoned that if the human population continued to grow unchecked, sooner or later there would be an insufficient living space and food for everyone. So this is kind of what we mentioned in our last chapter with the carrying capacity and things like that. So he was kind of predicted that humans could not continue to grow like this. So how this affected Darwin is that when he read his work, he realized that this reasoning applied to plants and animals as well. So therefore, if all the offspring of almost any species survived for several generations, they would overrun the world. So flies, if they just continued to reproduce like humans were doing, they could overrun the world and just basically take up everything. And this information was central to Darwin's explanation of evolutionary change. And we're going to talk about that again more in depth as we get later on in the chapters. So that's it for section 2. Let me know if you have any questions.